Chapter 16, A Profitable Exchange. Constable Rushton's tongue, broad and pink. Oh, this is her fantasizing how she makes up stuff. Okay, you ready? Constable Rushton's tongue, broad and pink, met the white dust for a tentative appraisal. At first touch, the taste was slightly sweet, but as he greedily slobbered on the paper, his mouth began to burn. Too late, the policeman groped for water, his scorched tongue taking on a yellow hue, darkening to purple as foam bubbled up from the wretched man's throat. Did he die? Of course he had not. Constable Beck would not have been in such good humor if he'd been telling the tale of a colleague's demise. It was paper from a square of Turkish delight, cried Constable Beck. He brought us a sweetie wrapper. We had a good laugh about that, we did. Oh, poor Hector. A warm flush swept up my neck on his behalf. How foolish he must have felt. First, how determined and brave in approaching the police, and then how small and foolish. I hated Constable Beck just then, and I hated Constable Rushton even more. I bristled on Hector's behalf. I suppose your investigation is tearing along and you have a suspect behind bars? I think you know perfectly well that I'm not at liberty to discuss the case, he said. That sounded to me like a phrase he'd practiced in front of the mirror, making himself feel important. But it won't be long, Miss Morton. Not long now. Not long now? Getting some answers would be the best revenge for Hector's humiliation. I mustn't back down. When might I have another chance to interrogate a police officer? I waited until we reached a flat bit of road. How to begin? I knew what Granny Jane would say. No man has yet been born who does not like to be admired for what he knows. Miss Graves, I managed. Oh, yes, said Constable Beck. She speaks of you. She never did. Not out loud, anyway. But I fancied I knew what she was thinking. Policeman's job is terribly difficult, she says. Catching robbers, being kind to old ladies, keeping clues straight in your head. You can do it all, Miss Graves says. Constable Beck grunted. He was sweaty, but not scowling. Miss Mary Ann was not the killer, I blurted. We know that, do we? Puffed the constable. I believe it to be certain, I said. And why is that? If I lived with a person I wanted dead, I began, I should contrive a convenient death at home, preferably an accident. I refrained from sharing my full catalog of creative murders. Would you not do the same? Constable Beck grunted again, most unhelpfully. I persisted. Would it not be wiser to avoid the complications of using a public place? If you dropped your corpse in a public place, said the constable, you've saved yourself the trouble of disposal. Chopped up in a suitcase, shoveled into a well, hurled from a cliff top, locked in a cupboard. Oh, an excellent point, Constable. Why had that not occurred to me already? If you do it at home, I suppose the suspect list is cut down to those who live there with you. That's why the mermaid room was a clever choice. Your dance teacher made it look like a spur-of-the-moment murder in a public place with plenty of suspects. Did you just hear what he said? He said, your dance teacher made it look like a spur-of-the-moment murder. So he thinks the dance teacher did it, Miss Mary Ann. I felt sick. She had enough poison on the premises to kill 10 old ladies, added Constable Beck, or 200 mice. Vermin rid. I'd had my suspicions, had even inquired of Mr. Tunweed at the museum after hearing Miss Mary Ann and Mr. Roddy Fusswell chatting about rodents quite freely. And here was official testimony. No one had carried poison to the mermaid room. It had been already waiting there to serve its demonic purpose. No wonder the police were so rude to Hector about his powdered paper, if they already knew the source. Unless there is a mighty clever character lying down false evidence, said Constable Beck. Miss Mary Ann Eversham is our murderess. He just told her. All she had to do was ask a few questions. He'd spit out of it, didn't he? For some not unwilling to discuss a murder, the constable had become usefully forthcoming. I don't believe it. I said it just can't be. Or could it be? Was I wrong about everything? The daughter, Rose. She'd be the second choice, said Constable Beck, except that She wasn't there, I said. That's right, and there's no trickery involved with the alibi. The vicar's wife is witness for every minute of Saturday up to the moment Rose learned of her mother's death. If Rose Eversham wanted her mother dead, she would have needed help. What about Roddy Fusswell? I wanted to say, but refrained. I wished first to know that if he'd done it, Rose was not a partner in the scheme. It's usually someone in the family going after money. I expect Marianne Eversham imagined she'd be getting some residual of her brother's estate once his wife was out of the way. Never mind Rose being the daughter. You'd be downright disheartened to know how often an inheritance enters the picture. What if Roddy Fusswell thinks he could marry Rose and get rich from her inheritance at the same time? Well, that's a bit far-fetched, said Constable Beck. Would you marry someone once he'd murdered your mother? I think we can knock out Fusswell and his helpers, along with the unrelated casuals like the flower delivery boy and the reporter coming back in the middle of the morning to find the case for his spectacles. Mr. Fibley was there too? He certainly had a knack for turning up whenever there was a hint of drama. A knack? Or a darker purpose? Was he also smitten with Rose? The canny reporter had fallen in love with the beautiful heiress from afar. He asked her disagreeable mother for permission to propose, but she sneered at his audacity and sent him away, little knowing the dangerous strength of his resolve. Actually, that was her daydreaming, right? Actually, I had some questions I'd like Mr. Fibley to answer. What had he noticed in the mermaid room on the morning of the murder? Who had used the pantry? Had anyone aroused his suspicions when he thought about it afterward? Which part of the story was I missing? There's only one thing stopping us from putting Miss Marianne Eversham in prison this very night, said Constable Beck. What's that? I whispered. The bicycle seat seemed suddenly very hard. What if the nasty cuppa was meant for her? What if we've got to make certain that she wasn't the one that someone wanted dead? She wasn't. The words slipped out before I could consider whether or not the policeman should hear them. Unless she was not well known to the killer, like Mr. Augustus Fibley, or even Mr. Roddy Fusswell. It is doubtful that either of those men was overly familiar with her personal habits. What makes you think of that? Said Constable Beck. Miss Marianne is a dancer, I said. She never eats sweets. Anyone who knows her knows that. She does not take sugar in her tea. I thought again of, I don't know that I would have given him that hint, right? I'm not sure how much I'd be sharing with him anyway. I thought again of Miss Marianne's little blue milk jug, and next to it the gilded sugar bowl with the crest emblazoned on its side. Mr. Roddy Fusswell had to bring his own sugar from the Royal Victoria Hotel because there isn't any in the pantry of the mermaid room. This is what she just told him. I shall make a note of that irregularity, said Constable Beck. You've been of considerable assistance for a person of youthful nature. I let myself grin for half a moment in the dark. I had offered common knowledge, Miss Marianne's dislike of sweets, after learning a small important detail. Mr. Fibley's timely presence in the dance studio just before it became the scene of a crime. I can walk from here, I said. You've done the hard part. We had reached the top of Bertram Road and were minutes from home. Pardon me for mentioning, said the bicycle as I climbed down from the bicycle seat, but you appear to be underclad for the weather. He reminded me just in time. I found my bundle under the privet hedge. Turn around, I told him. I turned my back to his back and pulled on my petticoat, chilled and wrinkly, but giving me an extra layer, however thin. We'll have to wake someone up, said Constable Beck, and get you safely inside. I'll just slip in the way I came out, I said. Through the kitchen. If you ring the bell, you'll give Mummy nightmares and set Tony barking like a fiend. Letting you go unreprimanded will not be adequate to the situation, he said. You go in and send Miss Graves down. You want me to wake up Miss Graves at midnight to speak with you alone, wearing her night clothes? She's tricking him, right? I felt the sing of an arrow winning its mark. Well, perhaps not. But I'll be back in the morning, and for now, he said, I want a promise from you that I will never find you prowling the road at night. Not ever again. I promise. That was easy. If I were ever again prowling the road at night, I would certainly avoid being found by Mr. Constable Morris Beck. And, said the constable, I want a promise that you will stop trying to do my job. You get into your bed and be a good girl after this. No more detecting, you hear me? Bed sounds delicious, I said truthfully. And I crossed my fingers inside the pocket of Cook's jacket to counteract the lie. And no more detecting until tomorrow. Off you go, then. Constable Beck tipped his chin toward the kitchen door, and I squelched up the path, sighing a gust of relief when I rounded the holly bushes and was out of his sight. I leaned Leonard's bicycle carefully against the back of the shed, intent on silence. I was halfway up the path when I heard, "Hey!" I went still. Had Constable Beck changed his mind and followed me to insist on seeing Charlotte? Or was it Mr. Fibley, again lurking in the garden? No, it was Leonard, who'd stepped out of the shadows. "You scared me witless," I said. He peered toward the road. "Your copper gone, then?" "He's not my copper," I said. "I nearly ran him down on Bertrand Road and—" "On my stolen bicycle?" said Leonard. "After I told you no?" I bowed my head. "Sorry, Leonard. I will not take your bicycle again." "No, Miss Aggie, you will not. I won't tell you again." He slunk away, back to his awful shed. I must speak to Mummy about that in the morning, if I weren't in terrible trouble for tonight's adventure. My feet were so numb I wanted to weep. I wobbled to the kitchen door, imagining the moment of pulling on my bed socks. Tucked under the door latch was an envelope with my name on it. I held it in both hands, staring. I had not seen this script before, but I knew it was from Hector. So he had delivered a note to her, and she had delivered a note to him. How did they not pass each other? That's just baffling to me. The letters were precisely formed with a flourish to the A that resembled the mustache he one day planned to wear. Inside the door, I put Cook's jacket back on its hook. Hector had also been sneaking through the streets in the middle of the night, delivering news to a trustworthy friend, just as I had been. My note would greet him upon his return to the vicarage. I stripped off my slippers and pushed them deep into the bin of kitchen refuse. I clutched Hector's letter and limped to my room. By the flickering light of the candle, I read his admission of failure. Powder, not poison. Hector Perot is an idiot. Poor Hector. That is the end of chapter 16 and the end for today.